My stepdaughter looked me dead in the eye and said, "The best gift you can give me is to not show up at my wedding. You're just my stepdad. Just Daniel." I had paid for everything. Her venue, her dress, even signed the lease for her new house. And my wife? She sat there and said nothing. Not one word. So I gave Riley exactly what she asked for. I disappeared. But before I left, I canceled the venue, backed out of the lease, and left something on the front porch that made them both go dead silent. And I don't regret a single thing. You may conclude I was jealous. But what will you do if you found yourself in my position? Will you have overlooked or stand up for yourself? Let me know in the comment section. Let me hear from you. Please subscribe for more interesting stories like this. My name is Daniel, but in that house, I was always just Daniel. Never dad, never stepdad, even. Just Daniel. It didn't start out that way. When I married Heather, Riley was barely 11, awkward and stubborn, hiding behind bangs and sarcasm like a shield. Her real dad had skipped town when she was 6, and I never asked why. I didn't want to be the replacement. I just wanted to be someone who stayed. I remember driving her to school, sitting through hours of dance recitals where she barely remembered the choreography, waiting outside the mall in my truck while she and her friends bought glittery phone cases. I paid for her braces, cried the day she got accepted into college. I gave her the kind of love that shows up every day, not loud or flashy, just there. When she got engaged, I was genuinely happy for her. Not performatively happy, proud. I thought, I've done something right. I thought I'd be walking her down the aisle, or at least standing near the front, holding back tears, watching a piece of my life start her own. So, when Riley told me, casually, over dinner, like she was ordering another round of drinks, that the best gift you can ever give me is not to be present at my wedding, my world didn't just crack. It shattered. She didn't even look up from her phone. I blinked at her, thinking I misheard. "What?" She sighed, like I was making a big deal. "It's nothing personal, Daniel. You're just not really part of that side of things. You're not my real dad. It would just be awkward." I waited for Heather, my wife, to say something. Anything. But she didn't. She just kept sipping her tea, eyes locked on the table like there was something fascinating in the wood grain. I looked at her like a man clinging to the last piece of a cliff. "You're okay with that?" She didn't answer me. She just mumbled, "Let's not make this into a fight." I pushed my chair back. Not angrily, not dramatically, just slowly, like gravity had gotten heavier and I couldn't sit there another second. My appetite disappeared somewhere between her words and the silence that followed them. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, staring into the dark. I kept thinking about all the moments, small, forgettable to most, where I'd chosen Riley. When I skipped a work conference to be at her school's career day. When I drove 3 hours to get her from a party because she didn't feel safe. When I let her cuss me out at 17 for not letting her go to Cancun for spring break, and still brought her soup when she caught the flu a week later. I hadn't just played dad, I was one. Maybe not in title, but in time, in love, in sacrifice. But apparently, all of that was invisible. I tried to tell myself it was just wedding stress, that she didn't mean it, that she'd come around. But days passed, and nothing changed. If anything, things got colder. They still sat at the kitchen island, planning table settings and playlists. Heather would lower her voice when I walked into the room, like the sound of their joy might offend me. I wasn't angry yet. Not then. Just numb. Like someone had quietly unplugged me from the life I thought I'd built. Then one night, I heard Riley laughing upstairs on the phone with her fiancé. "Yeah, he's not coming." It's honestly a relief. My mom doesn't even like him that much. It's like, awkward enough he still lives here. That was it. Something in me clicked, quietly. Not like a scream, but like a door locking from the inside. I wasn't going to beg to be loved. Not anymore. I wasn't going to fund a wedding for a girl who saw me as a ghost. And I sure as hell wasn't going to stay married to someone who watched me be humiliated and said nothing. But I didn't yell. I didn't slam any doors. I just started paying attention. To dates, to finances, to what I had power over. And the thing about silence? It gives you time to plan. The thing about betrayal is that it rarely comes with fireworks. No explosion. No loud cracking sound. Sometimes, it arrives as silence. The kind that rings in your ears while the world carries on, completely unaffected. The kind that follows you from room to room, louder than any scream. That's what our house felt like after that night. Quiet, but hostile. I couldn't stop hearing the way Riley said it. You're just my stepdad. Just Daniel. Like I was a footnote in my own home. I slept in the guest room the night after that dinner. Not out of anger. I just didn't feel like lying next to someone who could swallow that kind of insult and keep chewing. Heather didn't ask why. She didn't even knock. She just let the space grow between us like it was convenient. Like I had moved from husband to housemate. 2 days later, I tried to talk to her. I made coffee the way she liked it. Hazelnut creamer, a splash of almond milk, and set it in front of her while she scrolled through her tablet. Can we talk about what Riley said? She didn't look up. Daniel, please don't do this right now. No, we're going to do it. Because that wasn't just a mean comment. That was her uninviting me from her wedding. The wedding I'm paying for. Heather sighed. She's stressed. She didn't mean it that way. She meant it exactly that way. And you said nothing. Finally, she looked up. Her eyes were tired, like she'd aged 5 years in a week. You're taking this too personally. I laughed, bitter and low. It was personal. She erased me from one of the biggest days of her life. And you stood by and let her. Heather rubbed her temples. What did you want me to do? Start a fight the week of her wedding? She's always had a complicated relationship with you. That's convenient, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Funny how it was never complicated when I was paying tuition or fixing her car. There it was, the first real silence. Not just the absence of noise, but the kind where two people stare at each other and silently agree this is the beginning of the end. She stood up and walked out without another word. I stayed seated, staring at the coffee now gone cold. I didn't finish it. I didn't move for almost an hour. That night, I went into the storage closet and pulled out a box labeled Riley. It had old report cards, birthday cards she made me when she was younger, even a Father's Day mug from when she was 13. Best stepdad ever. I sat on the floor, holding it in my lap, wondering when the shift happened. When did I become just another man passing through? The truth was, I saw it coming. Little signs over the years. The way she'd introduce me to her friends as my mom's husband. The way Heather would correct people if they called me her dad. Oh, he's not her real father. I used to ignore it, chalk it up to awkwardness. But now I realized I was the only one who saw myself as part of that family. They never did. I didn't cry. I'm not the kind of man who cries easily. But my chest felt tight for days, like I was holding something in that wanted to break me wide open. Still, I went through the motions. I drove to work. I sent out invoices. I smiled at clients. At home, Riley and Heather buzzed around with wedding excitement. I stopped being invited to conversations. Heather stopped asking my opinion on flowers, or food, or anything really. She acted like I had quietly resigned from my role. Maybe I had. But there was one thing they forgot. The venue was under my name. So was the lease on the new house Riley and her fiancé were planning to move into. Every dollar that had built this dream wedding, every chair, every candle, every deposit, I had signed for it. And I still had time to make a decision. One night, I sat in my truck outside a bar for an hour before I went in. My buddy Steve was already at a booth. He looked up and whistled when he saw my face. Man, you look like hell. I slid into the seat. Feel worse. He handed me a beer and didn't push for answers. That's why I liked Steve. We sat in silence for a while before I finally told him what Riley said. When I finished, he just shook his head. You're not seriously still paying for that wedding, are you? I stared into my drink. It's already in motion. Feels like too late to pull out. Steve leaned in. If it were me, I'd pull the plug. You're not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm, Daniel. His words sat with me all the way home. That night, I pulled up the venue contract. Non-refundable deposit, yes. But the final payment? Due 1 week before the event. I hadn't sent it in yet. And the lease on the house still had a clause for early withdrawal, as long as I filed by the end of the month. I looked around the living room, the framed pictures, the old couch we used to cuddle on, the dining table that now felt like a courtroom. I didn't recognize this place anymore. And then I made a plan. By the time I hit send on the cancellation email to the venue, my hands didn't even shake. I thought they would. I expected regret or guilt to come crashing through the screen, but it didn't. All I felt was relief, like unclenching a fist I'd been holding since the day I walked into Riley's life. The venue manager, Susan, was polite but clearly shocked. "Mr. Whitaker, you're aware this means forfeiting your deposit?" "I'm aware," I replied calmly. "But you can open the date to someone else. I won't be needing the space." A pause on the other end. "Then, do you want me to notify the bride?" I almost laughed. The bride. That's all I was now, a payment method attached to her wedding. "No," I said, voice flat. "She'll figure it out." I hung up and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling of my office. The walls felt tighter than usual. Not because they were closing in. No, this time I was finally pushing out. I was done being generous for people who couldn't even look me in the eye when they hurt me. That same day, I called the leasing office for the new house Riley and her fiancé were supposed to move into after the wedding. We were a week out from the cutoff to pull the application. I had co-signed for them. Another favor I'd done to make things easier. They hadn't even thanked me. I asked to remove myself from the lease and have it reevaluated based on the fiancé's income alone. The leasing agent hesitated. "That might affect their eligibility." "I understand," I said. "Do it anyway." By the time I hung up, I'd just detonated the foundation of a wedding they built on my money, my silence, and my love. But I wasn't finished. The next few days, I moved carefully. Like a man preparing to leave a crime scene before the alarm goes off. I didn't want drama, not yet. I wanted clarity. I packed a few suitcases, enough clothes for 2 weeks. Grabbed all the essentials from my office. The files, the personal items, the birth certificate Riley never asked me for, but needed to apply for her first apartment. I took it all. Heather didn't notice. Or maybe she did and chose not to ask. We barely spoke. She was either out with Riley at dress fittings or holed up in the bedroom texting, phone tilted just out of my view like she was shielding classified information. The tension between us had stopped feeling sharp. Now it just felt like dust in the air, unavoidable, but too faint to clean up. The night before I left, I wrote a letter. Not out of spite, out of necessity. I wasn't going to leave like a thief in the night, but I also wasn't going to stay for one more second than I had to. I started the letter with the same words Riley had said to me. "The best gift you can ever give me is not to be present at my wedding." Then I told her I had given her that gift. I listed every cost I had covered, from the $3,000 venue deposit to the down payment on the house to the checks for bridal accessories Heather had asked me to just cover for now. I wrote it out not to guilt her, but to remind them both of what they'd chosen to forget. I ended it with this. You don't get to erase people and still expect their support. You don't get to humiliate someone who showed up for you when no one else did, and then cash their checks on the way out. And then I printed the receipts. Literal ones. I went to the printer, gathered every invoice, every bank transfer, and stapled them neatly. Then I placed them in a manila envelope marked for Riley and Heather. On top of the envelope, I laid down the set of house keys Riley had cried about receiving just a month ago when I surprised her with the lease. The next morning, I left before sunrise. But before I drove off, I placed the envelope and the keys on the front steps. Just sitting there. Nothing hidden. I wanted them to see it, plain and center. Like I had been, all these years. I drove to a small furnished apartment on the other side of town. Temporary. Quiet. No wedding chatter. No sidelong glances. Just peace. I sat on the couch for a long time, doing absolutely nothing. And it felt good. God, it felt good. By noon, the calls started. First from Heather, 3 missed calls, 2 voicemails I didn't listen to. Then Riley. 1 message. No apology. "Daniel, what the hell did you do? The venue says the booking's canceled. Mom is freaking out. You can't just pull out like this." I didn't respond. 5 minutes later, another call. "You're so petty. I didn't mean what I said the way you're twisting it. You're ruining the best day of my life because you can't handle not being the center of attention. Grow up." I still didn't respond. Because the truth was, I had grown up. Years ago, when I decided to be a dad to a kid who didn't ask for one. When I loved without needing credit. When I gave without expecting repayment. But now I was done. And as I sat there, phone buzzing in the distance, I realized something. They only noticed my absence when it cost them something. The day the final payment was due for the wedding venue, Riley and Heather still hadn't figured out what I'd done. I imagined it clearly. Riley waking up late, brushing off a reminder email from the venue. Heather sipping her overpriced coffee, humming as she flipped through the wedding program. Maybe even bragging to one of her sisters. Daniel took care of everything. He's dependable like that. They had no idea the ground had already crumbled beneath them. It wasn't until later that afternoon that the panic hit. The venue emailed Riley directly after my cancellation became official. She called me twice, then a third time. By the fourth call, I turned my phone off. Not silent. Off. I wasn't interested in being their crisis hotline. 2 days later, Heather showed up at my apartment. I heard the knock around 9 p.m. Soft, uncertain, the way you knock when you're not sure you have a right to be there. I opened the door, and there she was. Pale, shaky, trying to hide her emotions behind a thin smile. Can we talk? I let her in. Not out of kindness. Out of curiosity. She looked around the apartment like it was foreign terrain. You've been here the whole time? I have, I said. She folded her arms, the same way she used to when Riley would come home past curfew. You didn't think you owed us an explanation? I left an envelope, I said calmly. 15 pages of one. Her jaw clenched. You blindsided us, Daniel. You embarrassed us. I leaned against the counter. You mean like how Riley blindsided me at dinner? Or how you didn't say a single word to defend me? She was upset. Weddings are emotional. I laughed just once. It came out harsher than I meant it to. You really want to compare a moment of embarrassment to being told, after 12 years, that I was never family? Heather's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't reach for her. I let her sit with it. She didn't mean it like that. Then how did she mean it? I asked. Because I've replayed it over and over, Heather. She looked me in the eye and said, You're not my real dad. Just Daniel. And you said nothing. Not a single word. Heather shook her head, but she didn't deny it. She couldn't. You're throwing away this family over one mistake. There's no family to throw away, I said, quiet but clear. Families don't treat each other like this. They don't use people like ATMs and then act like they're lucky to be in the room. She went quiet then, for a long moment. Then she whispered, You heard her. I tilted my head. You know what's wild, Heather? She didn't even realize I was gone until the wedding started falling apart. The next few days were chaos, from what I heard. The venue was gone. The house. Gone too. Riley and her fiancé tried to scramble for alternatives, but everything decent was either booked or far more expensive. She posted a vague story on Instagram, some passive-aggressive caption about when people show their true colors. Her friends commented with the usual pity, You don't deserve this, and cut off the toxicity, girl. None of them knew what really happened. None of them had been there when I cleaned vomit off her dress at prom or stayed up with her after her first breakup, letting her sob into my hoodie for 2 hours. And now I was the villain in her filtered story. A week before the wedding, I got a text from Riley. No greeting. Just this. Can you at least pay for the photographer so the day isn't ruined? I stared at the screen for a long time. No apology. No recognition. Just another ask. I didn't respond. The wedding still happened, kind of. They held it in someone's backyard. Last-minute decorations. Folding chairs that didn't match. Heather wore a forced smile in every picture Riley posted. The lighting was terrible, and someone's dog barked through the vows. They tagged everyone. Except me. No mention. No thanks. I didn't exist in that day. Just like I hadn't existed in the one conversation that started it all. But I watched every story. Every post. Every awkward, over-filtered smile. And I didn't feel left out. I felt free. The first time Riley called me after the wedding, I let it go to voicemail. Not because I was angry. I wasn't anymore. I had moved past that stage. Anger was loud, reactive. This was peace. The kind that only comes when you stop trying to earn love that never wanted you to begin with. The voicemail came through late at night, the kind of hour when regrets get brave and people finally say what they mean. But not her. Daniel, I don't even know what to say. You humiliated me. Do you know how hard it was to explain to everyone why our venue canceled? I had people whispering about us the whole night. Mom was a wreck. You couldn't just suck it up and be there for me. I stared at my phone like it had grown a second screen. No mention of the actual humiliation, of the moment she reduced me to a stranger in front of the woman I married. No recognition that she'd erased me from the wedding entirely and still expected me to bankroll it. In Riley's world, I hadn't pulled out of the wedding. I'd ruined it. That was the problem with giving too much for too long. People started to believe it was their right. The next morning, I got a knock at my door. It was Heather. Again. This time, her eyes looked different. Not wounded, determined. She held a manila folder in her hands, and I recognized it immediately. My envelope. The one I'd left on our doorstep. "I just came to return this," she said, stiff. "Riley doesn't want it." I took it from her and nodded. Didn't expect her to. She hesitated at the threshold. "She's hurt, Daniel. She thought you loved her." I blinked. The audacity of that sentence settled on my skin like a rash. "I did," I said. "I loved her through every slammed door and silent treatment. I loved her when she called me to come get her from a party at 2 a.m., and when I helped her get her first job. I loved her, Heather. But love doesn't mean I have to keep signing checks for someone who looks me in the face and tells me I'm not part of her life." Heather's mouth opened, then closed. "She didn't mean it," she said weakly. "She meant it enough to say it. And you meant it enough to let her." Heather finally stepped all the way in. I didn't know what to say. It all happened so fast. "That's not true," I replied. "It wasn't fast. This has been building for years, and you let it. Every time you corrected someone who called me her dad. Every time you stayed quiet when she dismissed me. You taught her that I was optional." She flinched like I'd hit her. But I wasn't being cruel. Just honest. She stood in my apartment, looking around like she couldn't believe this was really happening. Like she expected this to be a phase. A tantrum. That eventually I'd come back with my tail between my legs, begging to be part of the dysfunction again. But I'd crossed the line. The one between being needed and being used. And I wasn't going back. 2 days later, I ran into Riley by accident. I was leaving the grocery store with a bag of paper towels and almond milk when she stepped out of a nearby cafe. She froze when she saw me. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun, and she wore the same jacket I'd bought her last Christmas. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Daniel," she said, like my name still tasted strange in her mouth. I nodded. "Riley." She looked at the bag in my hand like it was a weapon. "I've been trying to talk to you. I got your messages. So you're just done?" "I am." She blinked rapidly. "You really don't care what people think." "I care about how I was treated." I stepped closer, but not too close. Just enough to make sure my voice hit home. "You didn't want me at your wedding. Fine. But you don't get to banish someone and still expect their wallet." She crossed her arms. Defensive. I was upset. "So was I said. "But I didn't try to erase you. You did that all on your own." For a second, her mask slipped. Just barely. Her mouth trembled like she might finally say the thing I had waited for all these years. But she didn't. Instead, she scoffed. "You've changed." "No," I said quietly. "I just stopped pretending I didn't matter." That night, I lay in bed thinking about everything. The wedding. The silence. The envelope. The look on Riley's face when she realized I wasn't bluffing. That I could leave. That I did leave. I thought about all the times I stayed silent just to keep the peace. How much I gave. How little was returned. And for the first time in years, I slept without grinding my teeth. I used to think walking away meant failure. That real love meant enduring whatever people threw at you, even when it hurt. That being family meant swallowing your pride, your feelings, your boundaries. But now, I know better. It had been a month since the wedding. The call stopped. The texts slowed to nothing. No surprise visits. No surprise anything. It was like the house I used to live in had sealed up behind me. The door slammed shut not with anger, but with indifference. And that was fine. Because I didn't leave quietly for attention. I left because I finally realized what staying was doing to me. And there's something deeply liberating about choosing yourself after a lifetime of being everyone else's backup plan. People ask me now. Old friends, coworkers who heard the whispers, "Do you regret it?" Not for a second. Do I wish things had been different? Sure. I wish Riley had seen me. Really seen me. I wish Heather had stood beside me instead of behind her daughter. I wish the years I gave had meant more. But I don't regret pulling back when I did. I didn't leave Riley's wedding to punish her. I left because she told me, clear as day, that my presence wasn't a gift. So I gave her what she asked for. And when the gift stopped coming with a check attached, They finally realized I'd been giving more than they'd ever acknowledged. That house we almost moved into. Someone else signed the lease a week later. A young couple, newly engaged. I watched them tour the place from a distance one day. They were laughing, holding hands, fresh, untouched by resentment. It made me smile, not out of bitterness, but because I knew something now that I hadn't back then. I could build a life somewhere else. Again, on new ground, on real mutual care. I did something I hadn't done in years. I booked a solo trip to Colorado. I'd always talked about going. Mountains, silence, sky. I stayed in a small cabin and didn't talk to anyone for 3 days except a woman at a diner who called me sweetheart and poured my coffee like it meant something. I hiked. I read. I sat on a deck and watched the sun burn off the frost until all that was left was clean, bare light. And in that stillness, I came to terms with something. I was never just Daniel. I was the man who showed up when no one else did, who loved a child not born of me, but chosen by me, who stayed when things were inconvenient, hard, thankless. And now, I was the man who finally walked away, not because I stopped caring, but because I finally started caring about myself, too. I haven't blocked Riley or Heather. I didn't burn any bridges. I just stopped walking across them. If either of them ever calls with something real, something honest, I'll decide then what to do. But I'm not holding my breath. I'm not checking my phone. I'm not waiting at the door like a forgotten dog hoping to be let back in. I don't hate them, but I don't owe them either. The last thing I did before closing that chapter for good was box up everything that reminded me of the past. Old Father's Day cards, family photos, receipts I used to need as evidence. I didn't burn them. I didn't toss them out the window in some dramatic farewell. I just stored them away, because I didn't need to carry them anymore. The man I am now doesn't need proof of what he gave. He knows, and he walks forward anyway. If you've ever been pushed aside by the people you gave everything to, if you've ever had to walk away from a family you once built from scratch, this story is for you. Drop a comment if you've had to make a painful, necessary exit. And if you're still learning to protect your peace, hit subscribe. You deserve to be seen, even if you're the only one who sees you.